Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled Karen Reddit stories. In this Ripestories video, imagine a neighbor so entitled she thinks she can just bully an elderly couple into giving up their beloved property. She thought they were an easy target and threatened them with a massive lawsuit, but then I got involved. Wanna guess who ended up paying the ultimate price? Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, Entitled Karen tries to bully old couple into giving up their property, claims she owns half of their garden. So this story is not actually my own, I was slightly involved, but this incident was more targeted towards my grandparents rather than me. I thought this was an interesting story, so I thought I would share it. My grandparents live in a pretty nice neighborhood. There's not too many young people in the neighborhood. It mostly consists of middle-aged or elderly folk. That's good for my grandparents, though, since they can 1. Have people to talk to, and 2. Have people who can help them if they need it. I visit pretty often and I try to help out when I can. I've met their neighbors and they're pretty nice and friendly people. Mostly. We will get to that later. The one thing that stands out about my grandparents' house is the garden that they have in the front. It's got all sorts of flowers. I know there's roses, but I don't know the names of anything else. It's also very cute. There's also all sorts of decorations like garden gnomes, tiny pinwheels, all of that. It is just your very stereotypical old person garden. Both my grandparents have been tending to it for years, and gardening keeps them busy throughout the day. It is truly their pride and joy, and I can totally see why. But as much as this garden brings this joy, it also indirectly brought them a tad bit of trouble recently. Their neighbor, who we can just call Karen, began harassing them over the garden, and more specifically, the land that the garden sits on. My grandpa said that she had started claiming that half of my grandparents' garden belonged to her. The first time she approached them about it, she had been sweet, and I said it in quotations because she was obviously faking it. She made some small talk with them and then began talking about the garden, complimenting it and telling them that it was so beautiful, and then she said that she believed that part of the garden was actually hers. My grandparents were of course very confused by this and asked why, and she then claimed that it was because of a property survey she had done. My grandparents said that the land was theirs and left her alone, but Karen couldn't leave them be. At first it was just verbal harassment. Anytime Karen would run into my grandparents, she would remind them that the land was hers and that they had to give it over to her. When my grandparents didn't listen to her, she started harassing them, trying to force them to sign a boundary adjustment document to cede the land to them. She would also become pretty aggressive about it. Not physically, but she would raise her voice and remind my grandparents that the land was legally hers to scare them. That is when they called me over to help them because they were tired of Karen bothering them and didn't want to get bullied into signing something they would regret later on. So of course I stepped in as an intermediary. When I got there, they explained the whole situation to me and I got some extra context by asking around the neighborhood. Like I said, the neighbors are usually helpful. My grandparents don't like drama and they don't like gossip, but that doesn't mean that their neighbors don't. They gotta keep themselves entertained somehow, right? Anyways, I asked them about Karen and they told me about how Karen acting like this was not anything out of the ordinary actually, and that she often caused a lot of trouble in the neighborhood. She would apparently make all sorts of complaints and try to bully people into her way of things, hence why I called her Karen. So I decided to hang around with my grandparents and wait until Karen approached them again about the garden. I didn't want to confront her outright because I feel like she would have made it even harder on me and my grandparents, and I also feel like it would have looked more bad on me if I approached her and immediately began accusing her of something, even if I know she did it. It didn't take long for Karen to approach them again, which was no surprise at all. We had just gone out grocery shopping and I was helping them move the bags from the car into the house. Karen then approached us and said to my grandparents, "So, have you thought about my offer?" My grandparents looked at me nervously, but my grandpa decided before I could say anything. He said, "No, Karen, sorry, but we're not interested." He began to walk away. After that, Karen looked a little annoyed. "You know," she said, "what you're doing is against the law. I legally own that land, you gotta give it to me." That is when I decided to step in. I put the bags I was holding down on the porch and walked over to her, acting as friendly as I could, even though I was pretty pissed considering she was harassing my grandparents about their property. And by the way guys, just to quickly interject here, if some entitled awful Karen would mess with your grandparents and try to scam them, what would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Honestly, that Karen is pretty much the lowest of the low. I mean, if you try to scam elderly people, you cannot really go much lower than that. Also, if you still enjoy the stories stories about awful entitled people, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe post some star emojis in the comments if you enjoy my content. Thanks a lot. So anyway, I told her that I was my grandparents' grandchild and asked her what she was asking them about. She said that it was a private matter, and I countered that I wanted to help them since they were elderly and maybe I would understand better than she did, trying to come off as neutral. Karen then took a moment before she finally relented and told me she said that she had gotten a property survey completed and it stated that a part of my grandparents' land, specifically the one that encroached on part of the garden, belonged to her. I asked her if she had the property survey on her so we could both look at it together, but she got flustered and said that it was on her computer so she couldn't get it right at that moment, but that she was absolutely telling the truth. Trust me, bro. I said I was sorry, but that neither I nor my grandparents believed her, and I explained that if she didn't provide some proper evidence, we wouldn't accept the offer or make any changes to the property. This made her really angry, and she started attacking me. She screamed something along the lines of, "What do you know? You don't even live here. Why are you butting into other people's business?" I snapped back at her that she was unnecessarily making this harder than it needed to be, and that it wasn't wrong or unreasonable of me to want some proof. She then said that if my grandparents didn't comply, she was gonna sue them for decades of illegal occupation. Mind you, my grandparents have been living here since before Karen was probably born. No one has had previous issues with them apparently encroaching land before except her. Clearly, Karen was just trying to take advantage of them. And yeah, I was incredibly angry. I was seeing how stressed that this entire situation was on my grandparents. They are extremely kind people, and saying no to Karen kept making them nervous, especially with how persistent and aggressive she was being. And my grandparents were losing their minds trying to figure out what to do here, but didn't know how to approach it or where to start. The biggest thing for them was the idea of losing their garden. Like I said, it is their pride and joy, and they put so much effort into their beautiful garden, and having Karen destroy it, even only half of it, would have been soul-crushing. I wanted to get Karen off their backs. I waited a couple of days to see if Karen would actually provide a property survey, but Karen never did. I asked her again, but she once again said that she didn't have it on her. I was already convinced that she didn't have it, but now I was sure that she was just bluffing or lying. I decided to settle it once and for all. I knew that you could get legitimate property surveys, so I looked into it and researched around a bit to find an investigator/analyst, whatever you call it, who specialized in that sort of thing. I reached out to them and asked them if they could look into the boundaries between my grandparents' house and Karen's, and about 2 weeks later, they sent me the result to their property survey. As I expected, the land Karen was claiming didn't belong to her at all, but there was one thing that surprised me about that survey. So apparently, Karen has a garage and a driveway, which is pretty standard in all houses in general, but she also has a smaller shed and apparently extended land on the driveway right next to it. However, this apparently encroaches on my grandparents' property instead. All the houses in this neighborhood have a little extra space to their right, and that additional space was encroaching on that boundary. The investigator did a little research into it and saw that she had extra additions had been added by the previous owner. I don't know if that's the reason why the garden space seemed to be promoted by that website, but that was something interesting to point out. I decided to confront Karen with all of this info, and when I saw her again, I asked her once more if she had the property survey she kept claiming she had, and she said yes, and handed me a printout. But it wasn't a real property survey, it was something printed off a real estate website. I literally saw the logo in the corner. I said that her paper was not legit and was not a reflection of any legal records, and then showed her mine. I said that the property she claimed was not hers at all, and that her land was actually encroaching on my grandparents. I talked to my grandparents and said that they didn't care about the extra land just as long as Karen promised to leave them alone and no longer bother them about the garden. She then threatened to bring me to civil court for the matter. In court, Karen tried to make her same argument that she had been making the entire time. She said that her sources were legitimate and that she had generously allowed my grandparents to keep the space, but now that she needed it, she had to ask them to hand it over. She insisted that it was the law and that we had to follow legal boundaries. I made my argument and showed them the evidence I had, including the real property survey, and it was very quickly concluded that Karen was in the wrong. Because Karen was so insistent on these legal boundaries, the judge let the whole idea backfire on her. The judge essentially ordered her to have the driveway extension and extra shed removed as a result, and that if she didn't comply, the city would have to intervene. Karen wanted to argue, but there really was no arguing anymore, so she had to comply. Karen ended up removing the driveway, which I heard cost her a pretty penny. I don't know what she thought was gonna come out of this, but clearly her entitlement got the better of her, and now she finally has to pay for it. I'm glad the situation was worked out. It really was stressing my grandparents out, but now that it's over, they couldn't be happier. Karen has since stopped interacting with my grandparents. Although my grandparents felt bad about it, I insisted that they take advantage of the extra property to extend their garden. Since they were legally obligated to the space anyway, they did, and it's looking absolutely beautiful. They added more decorations, more flowers, and it's looking more vibrant than ever, and my grandparents couldn't be happier. And the next one is titled, Pay Rent on Time? No Problem. Posted on r/malicious compliance. So back in 2014, I was renting a small studio apartment from a private renter. I made decent money as a shift supervisor for a cosmetic tattooing salon and got into the habit of paying my landlord about 3 to 4 days early because of when my paydays fell. So even though in my rental contract it stated that rent is due by 5 p.m. on the 1st, I generally paid on the last payday of the month so that I didn't have to worry about it. So after about a year, I ended up switching banks. Because of this, they put a 24-hour hold on my first paycheck. My company was not big enough for direct deposit, so I just shot a quick text to my landlord saying that I'd be paying on time instead of early this month. Again, since the rental contract stated that rent was due the 1st by 5 p.m, I really didn't see this as being an issue. I was wrong. My landlord proceeded to send me a scathing text that basically said if I didn't pay on time that I would be evicted immediately, and then calling me all sorts of nasty things. Needless to say though, I was pissed. I never said I would be late, had never been late, just wouldn't be dropping it off early. So from that day forward, I always paid at 4:55 p.m. Yes, I would wait right outside his door in my car until a few minutes before 5 on the 1st. I also started looking for a new place to rent and ended up upgrading to a small one-bedroom about 6 months later. Edit. Obligatory. Wow, I didn't think this would blow up post. I feel like I should answer some common comments and questions I see. Number 1. I live in a very rural area. For example, my family lived on a 20-acre plot growing up and were kind of looked down upon because all the other plots in my neighborhood were 40 or more acres. It was not uncommon for there to only be one house per mile. What I was renting was a small studio cottage building on this guy's property far enough away from the main house that it was easier to drive down there. I think it was originally used for the migrant workers that worked there during the summer, but he decided to rent out one full-time when the farming industry took a hit. It was not bad, it was cheap, I think it was somewhere around $400 per month, maybe $450, and my cats were happily welcome since they were excellent mousers. Number 2, at the time my area had a 3-day pay or vacate law that allowed landlords to evict after 3 days of non-payment. The law has since changed, but at the time, the laws heavily favored the landlords, plus like most places not owned by a property management company around here, it was month to month. Number 3, I didn't really text him specifically to let him know that I would be paying on time. Since I dropped off the rent in person at his house, I usually texted him to find out when he and his wife would be home, so this time I texted him something along the lines of, bank being dumb, so I'll be there on the 1st with rent. What time should I come? Again, it was 2014 back then, so I don't remember the absolute specifics. And the next one is a very interesting story from r/Ripestories, and it is titled, You don't want to clean the cement container and listen to the towering crane operator? Enjoy cleaning it in the bog of full wet cement and mud in the middle of winter. Posted by user Nefer the Ardent on r/Ripestories. So for context, I'm a towering crane operator in Poland and I've worked for quite some time on this particular construction site without any major incidents. Until one night when we were about to finish work for the day. Every time you finish working with the cement, the crew must clean the cement container, otherwise it gets clogged and becomes unusable for the next batch. At that time it was already winter, so the days were short and cold, and on this particular evening it was raining with a freezing wind, and we were about to finish our shift, when the crew told me to put the dirty cement container on its usual resting spot. So I asked them on the radio if they wanted to clean it first, but they completely ignored me and continued to ask me to put it down. I asked a couple more times, but I got ignored and finally assumed they're gonna clean it tomorrow morning, since the crappy weather. So we all went home. The next morning the work piled up and everyone forgot about the dirty cement container until just before noon a new batch of cement arrived. The crew asked me to grab the container and get it up and filled, which I refused because it was clogged up with yesterday's dry cement. I tried multiple times to communicate with them to clean that damn thing, but I got ignored again. So then the construction stopped and soon I got an angry call from the site manager as to why the construction has stopped. I didn't even get a chance to explain myself. He just ordered me to do what I'm asked to do and asked me a very important question. Who's the boss here, you or me? Alright, you're the boss. So I apologized and did exactly what I was asked to do and filled the clogged container with fresh cement. Well, to nobody's surprise, the cement would not flow and the crew tried all sorts of things to unclog it, from the massive vibrating hoover normally used to get all of the air out from freshly laid cement to just hammering the container. Spoiler alert, nothing worked, and while I just laughed at their efforts and watched Netflix on my phone, big W, since I had nothing to do, the genius site manager stepped in since the construction stopped again. One of his genius ideas was to put it all back to the cement truck. The only problem with that was that the cement wouldn't flow, obviously. Another one was to tip the container over and just clean it up. The only problem with that was that he wanted me to drag it on the ground using my towering crane, which can lead to serious damage to the crane itself, which I can be held responsible for later on. And that is because the cranes and the operators are managed by a separate agency independent from the construction site, so those are landed to the developer for as long as required, and operators assume full responsibility for the machines and everyone's safety, so that is why I refused to work and I wouldn't budge. Soon after, I'm getting a call from my boss from the crane agency saying there was a complaint that I'm refusing to work. So of course I calmly explained what's being required of me, and my boss said, "I hope you're not doing that." And I assured him that there's nothing to worry about. He thanked me for it and we ended the call. They finally managed to use an excavator to tip the container over and clean it, creating a bog full of wet concentrate, mud and cold water in winter. I ended up just watching Netflix for the rest of the day until I got another angry call from the site manager. He was telling me, "You were supposed to tell the crew to clean the container." I did multiple times, nobody listened. Then you shouldn't have let them go. You were supposed to do something, anything. And then I asked him the same question he asked me earlier. Who's the boss here, you or me? He got silent for a second and then got even angrier, lecturing me how irresponsible I am until he got tired. Then my boss got another angry complaint from the manager that he completely ignored. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing this story. It was not labeled as malicious compliance, but I would say this definitely qualifies as a top-tier malicious compliance story. And yeah guys, the next one is a super satisfying petty revenge story that you don't want to miss. And by the way, if you've watched until here, please don't forget to like the video because that would help me tremendously. So this was a really short and sweet immediate petty revenge moment. I was enjoying a cup of coffee on my back porch. We live on the 10th hole green on a golf course. It is set in nature, nestled by trees and filled with deer and turkeys and all sorts of other things like that. It is a very Keep Tahoe blue kind of place in the Sierra foothills. So this entitled prick of a man in his 70s cruises to the green on his golf cart and proceeds to jump out of the cart with a lit cigarette in his mouth that he just throws on the ground still lit before putting his ball. I was kind enough to wait for his shot, but then he walked back to the cart. I asked him if he was gonna pick up his cigarette. He rolled his old man eyes at me and I looked at his friends and said, "Really? You're gonna let this guy throw his nasty cigarette butt? It's not his personal golf course." They just weakly shrugged their shoulders and they all drove away. I put down my coffee and walked out front to my driveway, off to the side out of view. The next tee is directly across the street from my driveway. So as soon as the old man put his ball on the tee and takes his driver back, I immediately yell, "4, you effing litterbuck!" at the top of my lungs and completely ruined his shot. The ball literally bounced off his own golf cart and he practically threw his driver. It brought me immense amounts of joy. Thankfully, he had the foresight not to retaliate and they all drove off down the fairway. And yeah guys, that's certainly a good way on how to get revenge on an entitled littering jerk. The next one is a story from r/malicious compliance that you don't want to miss. It is titled, "Boss accused me of bullying, so I requested punishment." Years ago, I worked in a semi-public sector job as part of a successful team, helping make life easy for local businesses. Our team boss took a good job in the private sector and a new boss was recruited from a decent organization similar to ours in a different part of the country. She worked compressed hours Monday to Thursday and was off on Fridays. A month or two in, and although the new boss was quite particular about things being done her way and had upset a couple of my colleagues by criticizing their work, I'd had no problems with her. We had a team meeting where the boss said that our performance was not good enough. By the way, we were arguably the best in the country, and that she wanted to be more involved in what and how we did everything to ensure better quality, so we should just copy her to every client email so she could comment as needed before we sent another reply. Although this seemed inefficient, nobody argued, and I just asked her if I should wait until Monday for her to comment on any client emails received on a Friday. I cannot remember exactly what she said, but at the end of the meeting, she asked me to stay behind and then told me in a heated tone that my question was bullying behavior, that it was unprofessional to ask the question in front of the team, and said that my actions were the sort of thing that HR would see as grounds for dismissal and that I should be very careful in the future. I told her I understood, and we returned to our desks where I wrote up every single detail of the entire meeting and interaction and sent it to the head of HR with the explanation that as bullying was very serious and may not be reported by the victim, I felt duty-bound to report myself. I also laid it on pretty thick about being appalled by my unprofessional behavior and the fact that my career was likely at risk, and I clearly had a desperate need for training and discipline to fix my dangerous ways. I also copied in my union rep, and within a day, me, my union rep, and my boss were with the head of HR, who, being a by-the-book professional, could find no indication of bullying or justification for my fears of being an unprofessional bully in need of re-education. I was asked to leave the meeting, my union rep stayed in, and I don't know what was said, but within 6 weeks, my boss was gone, and that same week my, weak and effective but likable, big boss called me in to thank me as he had wanted to get rid of her, but had not known how. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. When I had my beautiful baby girl, I was basically stuck in the house for the following 7 weeks. A long C-section recovery had me dying to get out of the house. I decided to go for a walk in a nearby park with my baby. I could not find a very comfortable way to keep her on me without the weight hurting my incision, so I chose to just push her in an infant stroller. My husband was at work anyway, and it was an amazing looking day outside. If I knew what I did now, I might have waited an extra day or two before venturing out. Now, Karen was not a stranger, and she was known around the neighborhood. This person was big into those pyramid schemes, and when she would come around asking people to join, she seemed personally offended when we would tell her no. Like she was so entitled, she expected us to just hand over money because she said so. Her doing something petty would not be a far reach by any means. Sadly, she was at the park that day and felt the need to approach me. Karen, do you need to be here disturbing everybody trying to enjoy the weather? I had zero clue what she was talking about and just looked at her with that WTF face. I had no idea what I was possibly doing that could be offensive to her or anybody else though. Karen, you came out here with that baby making noises and ruining the environment. Me, but she has not cried once since we got here. Karen, well, she is making sounds still. And you're just as bad with your noises. Me quietly singing to her? She expected the park to be silent for her? I was not singing loudly by any means. Just a quiet little lullaby that nobody would hear unless they were right next to me. Karen could have moved slightly and it would be quiet. She just wanted to cause problems though. I don't deal with these types of people and their crap and choose to just ignore them. That changed when Karen decided to fix the problem on her own and demanded to hold my baby to shut her up. I was very protective and nobody but me and my husband were holding the baby yet. If I was not letting close friends or family hold her, there was no way Karen was getting her dirty hands on my daughter. I did not think to hold the stroller tighter, but I wish I had, because the next thing I knew, she had pushed me aside and started to run down the path with my baby. I sprinted after her as fast as I could while screaming for help. Me, stop her! She just stole my baby! Please somebody stop her! I'm lucky that the people here are friendly and got involved. Others were now chasing after her too, and much faster than I was. One guy on a bike heard my screaming and just took off to cut Karen off and slow her down. It was enough for me to catch up, and when I did, I was not gentle at all. I full-on tackled her to the ground. Karen meanwhile is screaming now. Karen, help! Assault! This baby is in danger with her! Violent mother! Everybody saw what she had done though, and nobody was going to be on her side. The police came because somebody had called them for the kidnapping. Karen turned the entire thing around to me, assaulting her and wanting charges pressed against me for tackling her to the ground unprovoked. I was in pain and just wanted to go home where it was safe. Meanwhile, my baby had woken up and was crying, and I just wanted to feed her and relax. After a lot of talking and arguing, I was allowed to go home, but Karen did move forward with her assault charge against me, so she ended up suing me. I don't know how she got a lawyer to take that case, but my guess was that he did not know the entire truth of the situation. I got a lawyer as well, who after hearing everything told me that if I told the truth I should not end up getting into too much trouble. We went to court and Karen started talking about how she was just walking through the park when she noticed me being crazy, that I was putting the baby in serious danger and she needed to take her away for protection. Then I supposedly attacked her out of nowhere, but I had several witnesses at the park stating that Karen was the one who started the entire thing, and the only yelling I did was to alert people that my baby was stolen and get help. One guy even had video on his phone of part of the incident, which the other lawyer tried to get thrown out as being only a partial telling of the story. I got asked point blank if I tackled Karen to the ground. I told the judge that yes, I did it in order to get my baby back, having the same story as the witnesses while Karen had nobody on her side. Meanwhile, her lawyer was trying to pull some miracle by saying it should not matter why I assaulted Karen, just that I did it. The judge said that he would not find somebody guilty of assault in a case of a mom trying to keep their children safe, that it was defense and every mom would have that type of reaction. As for me being a danger to the baby, Karen was trying to claim that I had postpartum depression, which has a small percentage of women trying to harm their child. I did not have postpartum depression though, and I had doctor's testimony to back that up. I was going for my wellness checks, and that is something they keep an eye out for nowadays. What gets really interesting is that my lawyer managed to dig up that Karen was the one with a history of mental illness. I cannot remember what it was called exactly, but it made her an unreliable witness to the events. She was now being seen as the unstable one and had nothing left of an argument to get me thrown in jail. The judge found that I was not guilty of assault and told Karen that she was very lucky. She could have faced seriously charges of kidnapping, child endangerment, and possibly even child abuse. I felt that having to stay in the neighborhood was a worse punishment for Karen than just being sent to prison on those charges. Everybody knew what she had done, and the small reputation she had was now totally ruined. Nobody wanted to speak to Karen and instead spit on the ground when she would pass by, calling her a baby thief and just a constant barrage of hate. I personally saw that her car had been hacked at least twice by people. She was a complete social outcast, and for somebody with the ego and entitlement of Karen, that was worse than prison. With this, there was no end date, and even if she moved, people could look her up and find out exactly what happened. And the next one is also from r/malicious compliance and is titled Stop Mowing. Okay, so my neighbors rent their lower suite to their adult daughter, her partner, and their kid. The daughter has main character syndrome, has yelled at me to stop doing work outside repeatedly, and even called the bylaws on me for cutting my grass at 4 p.m. on a Saturday, and more. She also refuses to help her senior parents do their yard work, so I continue to cut half their lawn and completely care for the area below their retaining wall. I mean, it's no biggie, it's literally a quarter the size of my front yard and flat. Daughter Dearest, however, has continued to scream at me anytime I pull out the mower or trimmer in my own yard, and well, it's aggravating to say the least. At the end of May, she lost her mind for me mowing the lower area of the yard and screamed at me to stop, threatening to call the cops. So, let me tell you, I did exactly that, and I stopped. Then I sent my neighbor a lovely text explaining that her daughter was clearly distressed and asked me to stop, and now each week I mow to the property line, but no further, and that yard has gotten bad. Last week, daughter Dearest asked me if I could start mowing their lawn again because her mom was really mad. I declined, I said it's too loud and I might get in trouble again. Well, today she was out there manhandling a huge gas mower down 9 stairs and took 25 minutes to mow what takes me 3 minutes before struggling to get the mower back up. And by the way, guys, I would say if someone else wants to mow my lawn, they can do it even at 2 a.m. for all I care. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.